All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Billy D's podcast. I am absolutely thrilled that you are here. If this is your first time here, first of all, welcome. We are primarily an interview and a commentary podcast. You can find the Billy D's podcast pretty much anywhere podcasts are found, including Apple Podcasts, the Spotify, on down the line. We're on all of them, even the ones I can't pronounce. On the studio line with me right now is Gigi Langer. Gigi, welcome to the program.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks.
Oh, you're very welcome. Gigi has been on the program before. I'm going to cover a little bit of the ground that I did with her before, only because we have to presume there's a lot of people that didn't catch the original one. How long has it been now? Has it been about a year or two? Probably a little while since you've been on.
Yeah,
around there.
Yep.
Around there somewhere. Gigi is the author of a new book, Love More Now, Facing Life's Challenges with an Open Heart. And Gigi has been on the program before. The other book was called 50 Ways to Worry Less Now. And in regard to her new book, Love More Now, learn how to dissolve the negative beliefs restricting love for yourself and others. With your true self liberated, you will be able to handle difficult relationships and other challenges with wisdom, strength, and serenity. Gigi Langer, author of the award-winning 50 Ways to Worry Less Now, which I already mentioned, illustrates how she overcame alcoholism, codependency, and trauma to discover the love at her center. Drawing on ideas from A Course in Miracles, the 12 Steps, and Positive Psychology, Gigi shows you how to become a loving, open-hearted person with firm boundaries. And that's probably something that's very important and something that she will talk about. Before we get on to the new book, as I mentioned, you've been on the program before. 50 Ways to Worry Less Now. How did that do? Did that fulfill your hopes in terms of its circulation, or how do you feel about what was the first book in your mind a success?
Oh, yeah. I was really grateful that it got a National Indie Excellence Award and a lot of really good reviews from important reviewers and people whose work I admire. And it's got really good ratings on Amazon. And I've sold probably a lot more from my own store of books. So I've been sending them out autographed copies ordered on my website. So there's probably a lot more out there than what would show on Amazon. But yeah, I'm very happy with it. One therapist I know uses it as a reference book because,
Wow.
or people who are working, if they're in the 12 steps, it's not just for recovery, but it includes some of those tools. So yeah, it's doing really well and people have been very positive.
That is absolutely fantastic. Now, this is something that covers the area, I guess, of self-care, which is an area that we hear a lot about. It's kind of like a buzzword, got to take care of yourself. And there's all the cliches about being on an airplane and the oxygen comes down and you got to put it on yourself before you put it on anybody else. But it's actually, it's something that people should take seriously, right? I mean, you have to be content and at peace with yourself before you can handle other challenges. Would you say that's correct?
That's true. And that is the challenge, to find that peace within yourself. It's very, very, it can be elusive if you're stuck in some negative patterns.
It's hard to recognize it when you're in those patterns. That's the thing. It's kind of like being in a bad dream. A lot of times, you're in the bad dream, and there's a lot of times when you don't realize it. And it's hard for people to step outside themselves and say, okay, I need help. And one of the ways that you can stay healthy, I'm a big believer in that worry can be very destructive. It can tear your emotions down and it can have a physical impact on you. So if you haven't had a chance yet, I would say that check out the book 50 Ways to Worry Less Now. Of course, that's from our author, Gigi Langer, PhD. Now, where are you from now? Where am I speaking to you from?
Well, we've moved from Michigan to Florida. And so we're in Southwest Florida. And by the grace of God, we were not affected by the hurricane. So I'm very grateful for that. But some of our good friends and relatives were. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Florida seems to be like a happening place now. One of my good friends is down there, and he's enjoying it. So that is absolutely fantastic. Is the community down there that I would say is around recovery and mental health? How is that culture down there as opposed to Michigan?
Oh, it's thriving down here. There are lots of 12-step meetings, a lot of people interested in alternative healing, meditation, other modes of personal growth. So I would say, yeah, I find a lot of like minded people here. So that's great.
That's good. That's good. And another thing that I always mention when we talk about anything to do with mental health is stigma, because stigma can be one of those things that prevents people from getting help. This is especially in regard to mental health because people feel, unlike a physical ailment, they feel that it is a weakness when they are, emotionally hurting of some kind. In your own recovery and in all the research that you've done, how big of a problem is stigma when it comes to these things?
Mm. I think it's the biggest problem to the person themselves.
Yeah.
When I was facing my third divorce and having so many crash and burn moments in my life, I had the stigma against myself. I was somewhere at the base of me a really bad person. Otherwise, why were all these things happening to me? So that was a blockage to looking inside myself. And I think a lot of people have a concern about going into therapy or recovery
Yeah.
because if I thought if I ripped that band aid off, all the ugly would come flowing out at once and overwhelm me. And I was afraid I would find only bad things in there. But the truth is that once we get honest with ourselves and start growing, there is this true self, the open hearted being, and a source of wisdom inside of us that's always been there, I believe, and will continue. Just a matter of opening it up.
Yeah. Speaking of opening up, that's a good segue. Getting into the book, Love More Now, Love More Now, Face Life's Challenges with an Open Heart. And sometimes that can be difficult. We hear so many people, the old cliche here again, here's another cliche. I got a wall up. I got a wall up, How many times have we heard that? What are some of the obstacles that people have when it comes to that? Is there any what's the balance between having a wall up that you can't get out of as much as anybody else can't get in and just being a cautious person? How does one strike that balance?
Mm. That's a really good question. Well, I love that you brought up the wall because one of the images in the first chapter, I have the worry, the closed-hearted person with
Yeah.
an image, and there's a heart in the middle of them, and you can see a little brick wall in front of it. And then you see these clouds around their head of all the worries and negative thinking that's blocking the love from coming in. So they
Hmm.
really can get very love going out. And then the open hearted person, of course, has the heart open and the love's coming in and the love is able to go out. So the blockages, the whole book is about what the blockages are
Hmm.
and how to dissolve them. So I don't know if you want me to start into what some of those
Yeah,
are.
yeah, absolutely. Give us an overview of some of the things
Sure.
that you're talking about because I believe that's central to this because a lot of people that's their problem. That they're sometimes I don't know if it's an excuse or if they really believe it, but you hear the people say, "Oh, I'm afraid of getting hurt," and all those things that you hear people say about not getting into a relationship. These are all common things. So absolutely, review a few.
Right, right. So, you kind of know if your heart's closed if you're having a lot of work difficulties, worries, anxiety, failed relationships, substance abuse, et cetera, et
Hmm.
cetera. Life just isn't working. And so the first thing I do is start saying, well, where did these things come from? Well, of course, we all know about the family of origin influences. And it turns out that it's not just alcoholism in those families, but it's anything that would break apart the family dynamic so that the individual does not have his needs met or her
Mm.
needs met. So it could be obviously the alcoholic, everyone's worried about them. The kids don't get the attention, but it could be spousal abuse. That sucks up all the energy in the room, and the kids are left
Hmm.
there going, whoa. Special needs sibling, that
Hmm.
that sibling that's sucking up all the attention, and you're off on the side. Money troubles. So there's all kinds of things, but the basic thing is you're left with, oh my gosh, I'm not safe. This is not a safe world to be in. And I'm not worthy of love. And I'm not worthy of success.
Hmm.
So some people then quit trying and kind of go on in a failure mode, and others try to overcompensate, like I did, by becoming a perfectionist and a workaholic and so on. But
Hmm.
basically, none of those work because they're just compensation strategies for a
Yeah.
deep held false belief that ends up driving my life.
Right. Sure.
Yeah. So
That's
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to follow up with that, and you obviously you're an expert, your PhD, all these things, but you do have, as you mentioned, some personal experience. So, how much of your personal experience do you roll into your writing?
Oh, tons of it. I don't think I could write any of it without my personal experience and the experience of other people that I've worked with.
Yeah.
So there's lots of examples and stories to illustrate the ideas in here. And also, you mentioned the research part. There's a very well known study called ACE, Adverse Childhood Experiences,
Okay.
ACE. And it's worth looking up because it lists all these problem behaviors that result, but it's also very hopeful. With
Okay.
therapy and all kinds of interventions, we can heal these things. That's why I wrote the book. We
Yeah.
are not stuck.
Yes. And that's probably a good message too. A lot of people say, "Well, I've been through so much; things will never get better. This is the way I am." And when you have that kind of an attitude, it's probably a self-fulfilling prophecy in a lot of ways. But essential to anything regarding mental health, the idea that recovery is possible. It may not be the recovery that you expect or that you would like, but there can be a better life. I think that's the message of hope that gets lost in all of this. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And that's really why I wrote both books. There's no reason to suffer. It does take self honesty.
Yep.
And that's the first thing. And we were talking about that before, because if we're whether basically if we're numbing ourselves from our feelings with shopping, drugs, sex, eating, whatever, so that we always go to something else to make us feel better rather than sitting with what's going on with ourselves and trying to
Yeah.
learn from it, or joining a therapy or a group or somehow to learn how to handle our feelings, um, that is essential, because if I don't know what's going on with me, it's pretty
Yes.
hard for me to heal. Now, what I have to say though is, those people who say, well, I'm honest with myself. My mother always did X, Y, and Z, and that's why I have low self esteem. That is not what we're talking about. That might be a very first initial step. But the question is, and this is the best thing I ever heard at any meeting, because you're right, I came from an alcoholic family.
Hmm.
I had alcoholism myself. I had crash and burns relationships and so on. And when I went to heal, one of the things I learned at a 12 step meeting was I'm not to blame for my past, and I am responsible for healing it as an
Mm.
adult. So, really, that hopeful statement is what my books are all about. We
Yes.
can heal.
Sure. And that's important because a lot of people feel that the things that can never change for them, and just to hear that idea that recovery is possible is enough to give people hope, and I hope it does that. One of the other things that I often hear when it comes to not having an open heart, and here again, the title of the book is Love More Now, Face Life's Challenges with an Open Heart. One of the things that I will often hear people say is, I'll never do that again. Women say that a lot about men. I did that once for a man before, and I'll never do it again. What would obviously that's a destructive attitude, because there's a lot of times when you get into a new situation, what happened in the past isn't even relevant. The things that you have your guard up about are never going to be an issue. And in the process, and this is my own layman's opinion, you're going to miss things that could be wrong because you're too busy looking out for what happened before. So how do you clear the slate when you have that kind of an attitude?
I really think the base of it is, again, the self-honesty,
Yeah.
that we have to go deeper. It's not just, I'll never do that again. I said that after my first divorce. I said it after the second divorce. It wasn't until I got into therapy and I joined with a group of people who were growing out of their old negative patterns and into positive patterns that I
Yeah.
started to change. So what happens with these patterns, they've spawned whispered lies. And this is a key component in both books. The self talk that we have so often is negative. So the whispered lie, I'll never be safe. But then we form a pattern of trying to find a man who controls us because we think that will make us safe, right? And then we
Yeah.
feel stifled and we leave. So these fear based um, whispered lies kind of drive us into these negative patterns. And I've identified 6 of those patterns and also some of the major fears that go with those whispered lies, and then
Okay.
talked about different ways of healing those. Um, I should say, remind me to get back into the patterns, okay? But
Sure.
I should say that the healing, I do believe it requires self honesty, and I do believe requires joining with at least one other person with whom you can be honest and who can you can let them in somewhat.
Okay.
So a
Sure.
safe, appropriate person. In 12-step programs, we tell people to find a sponsor, but not someone you'd be romantically attracted to.
Okay.
So we need to join groups that will be growth prompting, because it's scary to look at ourselves. And it's so much easier when we're with other people who say, I've had that belief too. And what I found out was this, or I joined this class on meditation and it really helped
Hmm.
me, blah, blah, blah. So it's not a solo job, is the key thing. So, what are those 6 patterns? Um, Okay, so this is from based on Ernie Larson, who wrote a book in the 80s about stage 2 recovery. And so one of them is the caretaker. So if
Hmm.
I've grown up in an alcoholic family and I'm the oldest kid, I started taking care of everybody else.
Right.
Okay, I get into being an adult. What do? I take care of everybody else but myself. Then I
Right.
start getting angry. Then I start getting sick. Then I feel upset, and until I kind of uncover that whispered lie that I'm nobody if I'm not taking care of others,
Yeah.
then it's very hard to heal that. So another one is, I'll go through all 6 if that's okay. A
Sure.
martyr.
Absolutely.
This person who says, no matter what I do, it never works. I'm just a failure. And I think a lot of people end up in this place. I certainly did after my divorces. And so it's, the victim role.
Yeah.
And so, whenever anything happens, a martyr is not going to take responsibility, right? They're going to
Sure.
blame it. The perfectionist, this is one I know really well because that's how I dealt with my whispered lie of I'm not worthy. I worked my ass off to try to be perfect and to achieve. And, so that's
Yeah.
how I got my PhD. So, the perfectionist, of course, if I make any mistakes, I'm not lovable. Very hard to live with that.
Yeah.
The people pleaser. I have to make sure everybody likes me. And I
Hmm.
cannot deal with confrontation or conflict because people may not like me. Well, then you end up just being walked all over. And
Yeah.
then another of my favorites, the workaholic.
Hmm.
So the whispered lie is if I don't work this hard, I'll never be recognized. I'll never be okay. I'll never be safe.
Yeah.
And then what happens is they prioritize, or we do, over family, loved ones, etc.,
Yeah.
never putting that first. So those are all relationship killers because they're resting on some kind of what I call a fake ID that we have created in our childhoods that worked for a while. You know, getting the good grades made me feel good in school. So
Hmm.
they worked for a while, but then somewhere they stopped working.
Yeah. Interesting. Those are all
Yeah.
great, great things. And one of the things that I really like about a book like this is you might find this topic very specifically very interesting. Here again, the title of the book, Love More Now, Face Life's Challenges with an Open Heart. You may find that type of content very specific to what you're going through, but even if that doesn't pertain to you 100%, there's so many things about the back psychology of this that can help a person grow, and make you maybe realize why other people act the way they do, why you act yourself the way they do. So, what do you hope that the reader takes away, other than the obvious, learning some things about having an open heart? But what would you hope? What would be the best compliment somebody could give you about, reading this book and just they found the title interesting? They didn't necessarily have a love issue in their life, but they found it interesting. What would you hope that they take away from the book?
They would say, thank you for giving me something that is not over my head, not prescriptive, has a lot of examples, a lot of choices, but shows me a path
Mhm.
for recognizing what's blocking off my heart from myself and others and helping me open my heart to others and myself. So
Yeah.
now I am no longer pretending to be someone I'm not. I love who I am and I can accept people's love for me. I'm having happier relationships because I now don't have those whispered lies keeping me from being honest and open and direct. And the biggest thing is that I don't believe we overcome our self limiting beliefs and patterns without connecting with a very powerful, true self that's deep inside of us, that
Mhm.
love, that wise wisdom. Some people call it a higher power, or a higher self or a true self. It's a source of loving energy and wisdom. And that's why I say life challenges, because we're going to always have challenges. And the question is, how do I have a system for dealing with them? Well, of
Yeah.
course, the first thing I do is go into my old pattern, right? We're not saying that never happens.
Yeah.
We're saying that we've become honest enough and practiced enough to say, "Oh, there I am, freaking myself out. Okay, now let's use some tools. You know, am I going to meditate? Am I going to write? There are so many tools we can
Right.
use to finally get in touch with the wisdom of myself, my true self. And from there, I will know how to react and respond to this situation."
Hmm. Every once in a while when I do an interview like this, I always throw in a curveball. So I'm going to throw you a curveball.
Okay.
Maybe one that we didn't, in a lot of our information that we go through in preparing for the interview that we don't directly discuss. For all the concerns about living in a sex crazed society, there's so much sex in advertising, and there's all these images that are available now in the palm of your hand, with so many sexualized content type of platforms. For all that talk, most of the studies that I've heard, there's a lot of them, but there's a fair amount of studies that are showing, in regard to young people especially, they are having sex much less often than generations before, to a very high degree. Why do you think that is?
Wow. I couldn't even guess. I
I,
don't, I don't have grandchildren. I don't have children. I couldn't stay married long enough. So I'm so out of touch with that generation.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
a lot of the common answers that I hear is porn. And because of the fact that,
mhm.
especially for men, what used to be plan B and I don't mean to be crude here, but
Sure.
there was a time when men went out and they tried to get laid and they didn't get laid. So all right, they went to the porn. Now Plan A, what was Plan B has now become Plan A. It's just easier to get stimulated with porn. And I think that a lot of times this has done a lot of damage. And I here again, I'm not in any way preaching. This isn't coming like from moral values. I think porn has its place just like anything else. But I do think the availability of it being so readily available to people whose minds are still developing, I would have to say that that is problematic. But that's my own opinion. I don't have anything to back that
Sure.
up. But
Sure.
it just seems like it makes sense that that is an issue.
Yeah. I would say that in general, um, I mention A Course in Miracles, and that's been an influence on my way of dealing with fear because A Course in Miracles says we're either in any moment choosing a loving, open, non judging attitude or a fearful attitude. And it
Hmm.
also says that fear is of the ego and it believes that all we are is our bodies. So, this whole body identification and identification with the physical world as having all the goodies that we want is
Yeah.
all built out of this fearful ego. And I would say growing up and growing into a more open hearted person involves moving away from that as much as possible
Hmm.
into serving others, being open hearted, self care, loving, compassionate, etc., which is a whole different ball of wax. It's around love and care, and it's not around the body. Our body is just a communication device for sharing love.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good answer, and that's probably something that we need to concentrate on more is the human connection as
Mhm.
opposed to the straight sexuality. So that's a great answer. Again, what we are talking about today is Gigi's new book coming out in February 2023. Love More Now, Face Life's Challenges with an Open Heart. Where can people find the book once it becomes available?
Oh, I'm so excited. I just uploaded it to Amazon today. So within 3 days, the print version should be available, and within a week, the ebook. And that's very exciting.
Yes. Yes, and your enthusiasm for this topic certainly comes across very well. Where can people find you now? Let me see here. I do have your website is giglanger.com, and that's gigilanger.com. Where else can people find you? You're on all the usual places like Twitter
Yeah.
and yep.
Yep. I've been trying to learn how to make Instagram reels today without
Oh
much
wow.
success.
Well,
But
there's
we'll get
TikTok
there.
too. There's TikTok too. Don't forget if you're going to
Oh,
do
yeah.
that. You
Yeah,
can
so all of those.
Yeah, you can dual purpose those. And you know what?
Mhm.
This is a topic, quite frankly, that would probably lend itself to TikTok very well, or one of those, because relationships is something that I think is universal. Everybody wants to know how to connect with other people, and this is the type of thing that people love to talk about and learn more about. So it's a topic that is always going to be of high relevance. Are you an active Twitter user? Just to ask your
Yes.
opinion about Twitter. Twitter's going through a lot of changes. For those that may not follow social media, it was bought and sold. Very famous entrepreneur Elon Musk has purchased the platform. What do you feel about the future of Twitter? Do you feel it's going to improve, or what do you feel is going to happen?
I'm because of my stance on the world, I am withholding judgment until I see how it all plays out. I'm not a person who's going to say, oh, just because this person did X, therefore the result will be Y. And oh my
Yeah,
God, ain't it awful? I really protect myself from having those kinds of reactions to the world because it just takes up space in my brain that could
yeah.
be used for better stuff.
I would have totally agree with that. I would say that it's probably going to take at least 6 months for that to come into focus a little better. I got to tell you, if you're discouraged as a Twitter user, let me just tell you that changes had to come. It was inevitable because that platform was not sustainable. Okay,
Okay.
Whether Elon Musk got involved with it or not, that's a very objective truth. You can check into that. That company was bleeding money, And I believe that the model for social media, which is to take the user base, which are basically interacting with the other, and use them as a target for advertising, that model has to change. That model has
Mm,
the basic structure of that has been around since the inception of social media, and it's going to have to go into a different direction. And actually, apps like TikTok are taking it that way. So,
mm,
yeah,
okay.
I mean, yeah, and there's a lot of controversy around TikTok too about how invasive that app is into the other aspects of your life. I would say that's a very fair point. It's something that you have to keep vigilant on and monitoring. And if you don't feel comfortable, take it off your phone. But I got to tell you, if you're on social media at all, that's going to be an issue to some extent. And it's just one of the thing. Yeah, it's just one of the things that you have to deal with if you're going to use those platforms. Okay, well, I got to tell you, Gigi, always an interesting interview with you. Let me remind the audience one more time. The author is Gigi Langer, PhD. Love More Now, facing life's challenges with an open heart. And you can find that on Amazon. And if you have more questions, more things you would like to learn about Gigi, you can go to gigilanger.com. And of course, you can find her on social media. Gigi, thank you very much for coming on the program. I really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing that information with us.
Thanks, Billy. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely, Gigi. Thank you for being on. And to the audience, thank you for listening. Just a reminder, you can find me on Twitter. Real easy to find on Twitter at Billy D's. And you can tweet me anytime. Just be nice. That's what I always say. And always, you can find the Billy D's podcast on your favorite podcast platform, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, you name it. We're there. Thank you very much. And we will talk to you again next week.
Thanks, Billy.
I'm Billy Dees and host of the self-titled podcast, The Billy Dees Podcast. We are primarily an interview and a commentary-based podcast featuring authors and creators talking about their craft, advocates for community issues, and myself and an array of co-hosts discussing current events. There's no partisan ranting and raving going on here, just great content. You can find The Billy Dees Podcast on your favorite platform and on Twitter at Billy Dees. Thank you, and I hope you listen in.